currently. Or
It was October 4th in the year 1927 that sculpting began on the face of Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills National Forest of South Dakota. It would take another 12 years for the granite images of four of America's most revered presidents, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt, to be completed. The monument was the brainchild of a South Dakota historian named Don Robinson, who was looking for a way to attract more tourists to his state. He hired a sculptor named Gutzon Borglum to carve the faces into the mountain. The Lakota Sioux people, who consider the Black Hills to be sacred ground, strongly opposed the project. The mountain was previously part of the Great Sioux Reservation before being taken away from them by the U.S. government. According to National Park Service, the first face to be chiseled was George Washington's. Borglum first sculpted the head as an egg shape, his features added later. Thomas Jefferson's image was originally fashioned in the space to the right of Washington, but within 2 years, the face was badly cracked. Workers had to blast the sculpture off the mountain using dynamite. Borglum then started over with Jefferson situated on the left side of Washington. Washington's face was the first to be completed in 1934. Jefferson's was dedicated in 1936, with then President Franklin Roosevelt in attendance, and Lincoln's was completed a year later. In 1939, Teddy Roosevelt's face was completed. The project, which cost $1 million, was funded primarily by the federal government. Gutzon Borglum continued to touch up his work at Mount Rushmore until he continued his eternity suddenly in 1941. Borglum had originally hoped to also carve a series of inscriptions into the mountain outlining the history of our awesome nation. It was October 4th in the year 1957 that the Soviet Union inaugurates the space age with its launch of Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite. The spacecraft, named Sputnik after the Russian word for satellite, was launched at 10:29 p.m. Moscow time. Sputnik was launched from Tyuratam Launch Base in the Kazakh Republic. Sputnik had a diameter of 22 inches and weighed 184 pounds and circled Earth once every hour and 36 minutes, traveling at 18,000 miles an hour. Its elliptical orbit had an apogee, which is the furthest point from Earth, of 584 miles, and a perigee, which is the nearest point, of 143 miles. Visible with binoculars before sunrise or after sunset, Sputnik transmitted radio signals back to Earth strong enough to be picked up by amateur radio operators. Those in the U.S. with access to such equipment tuned in and listened in awe as the beeping Soviet spacecraft passed over America several times a day. In January of 1958, Sputnik's orbit deteriorated as expected, and the spacecraft burned up in the atmosphere. Officially, Sputnik was launched to correspond with the International Geophysical Year, a solar period that the International Council of Scientific Unions declared would be ideal for the launching of artificial satellites to study Earth and the solar system. However, many Americans feared more sinister uses of the Soviets' new rocket and satellite technology, which was apparently strides ahead of the U.S. space effort. Sputnik was some 10 times the size of the first planned U.S. satellite, which was not scheduled to be launched until the next year. The U.S. government, military, and scientific community were caught off guard by the Soviet technological achievement, and their united efforts to catch up with the Soviets heralded the beginning of the space race. Our nation's first satellite, Explorer, was launched on January 31st in 1958. By then, the Soviets had already achieved another ideological victory when they launched a dog into orbit aboard Sputnik 2. The Soviet space program went on to achieve a series of other space firsts in the late 1950s and the early 1960s. The first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, and the first three men, first spacewalk, first spacecraft to impact the moon, first to orbit the moon, first to impact Venus, the first to craft to soft land on the moon. Oh my God. However, our awesome nation took a giant leap ahead in the space race in the late 60s with the Apollo lunar landing program, which successfully landed 2 Apollo 11 astronauts on the surface of the moon in July of 1969. Our nation is the only nation to have visited the moon. It was October 4th in the year 1988 that televangelist Jim Bakker is indicted on federal charges of mail and wire fraud and of conspiring to defraud the public. The case against the founder of Praise the Lord, PTL Ministries, and 3 of his aides exploded in the press when it was revealed that Bakker had sex with the former church secretary, Jessica Hahn. On December 6th in 1980, Baker and Hahn had a sexual encounter in a Florida hotel room. Although they each told different stories of what had happened, Baker eventually paid Hahn over $350,000 to remain silent. When the arrangement became public, the scandal helped to bring down the entire PTL ministry. Hahn, who claimed that she didn't want to be in the spotlight, became an overnight celebrity. She posed for Playboy magazine, wrote a book about her relationship with Baker, and even briefly lived in the Playboy mansion. Hahn, a radio announcer in Phoenix, Arizona at the time of Baker's indictment, soon became a regular on Howard Stern's radio show and appeared in rock music videos as well. Very wise girl, Miss Hahn. She quickly took advantage and capitalized on her newfound fame. Jim and his wife, Tammy Faye, were on top of the world before the scandal first broke. They were enormously successful at raising money for their televised religious programs, and after its 1974 debut, their cable show became the highest rated religious show in the country. The Bakers then added talk show elements to standard preaching, often featuring celebrities, music, and comedy. With all of the money they made from their programming, the Bakers built a 2,200-acre resort, Heritage USA, which featured a studio large enough to seat 1,800 people. 6 million people visited the park in 1986, placing it behind only Disney World and Disneyland in terms of attendance. When the Hahn scandal was leaked, other televangelists were outraged. Jimmy Swaggart, in particular, went out of his way to condemn Baker. Tammy Faye responded to their critics by singing The Ballad of Jim and Tammy Faye to the tune of Harper Valley PTA on their show. Still, Tammy Faye could not defend the ministry against federal charges that the funding for Heritage USA had been acquired by defrauding their viewers and donors. Although the evidence wasn't solid, Jim Baker was convicted in 1989 and sentenced to 45 years in prison. The sentence was later reduced to 8 years, and he was released in 1994. Tammy Faye divorced Jim while he was in prison. She continued her eternity in 2007. Baker and Faye's relationship and downfall was the subject of a 2021 film, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, starring Andrew Garfield and Jessica Chastain. I gotta see that. Jessica Chastain. Historic information divulged and documented on this audio file can be verified on the